Assalamualaikum everyone. Welcome to Do Station with another video. I hope you are doing good, enjoying the life and learning as well. And my efforts are helping you guys. So we are learning the health and safety in easy manner from beginner to expert level. And we are covering the fourth module, which is hazard identification and risk assessment process, HIRA. And it is the fourth part today, in which we will cover very interesting topics, which are basically essential to ensure effective risk assessment, which include basically the pre-risk assessment preparations, which include the selection of criteria for the risk assessment assessor, and then what are the scope and objectives, how we define them for the risk assessment, what is risk assessment plan, we will cover it, and then what how we establish or compose the risk assessment team which is eligible and competent to conduct the risk assessment, and then different stakeholders, how we identify them, that we have to engage with them for the effective risk assessment process, and then what are the sources and resources that we require to ensure to conduct the risk assessment, and then what is the generic risk assessment and what is the dynamic risk assessment. So these are very interesting topics that we will cover today. So let's start it. Welcome to presentation, everyone. We are covering our series on hazard identification and risk assessment, HIRA process. Module guide. Our module is hazard identification and risk assessment process, and we are understanding the implementation of the risk assessment. So today we will continue it. Key topics, we will cover undertaking risk assessment, in which who undertakes a risk assessment, the assessor, then pre-risk assessment preparation, then sources of information, what is generic risk assessment and what is the dynamic risk assessment. So by the end of the video, you will be able to understand who undertakes the risk assessment, who is the assessor, what are the pre-risk assessment preparations, and what are the sources of information we can use during the risk assessment process, and what are the generic and dynamic risk assessments. Undertaking risk assessment. Let's start it. Who undertakes a risk assessment? Who should be the assessor? Very important question. uh, a thought-provoking question for you. You can test your current knowledge. Stop the video, think and answer. What do you think should be the criteria for a risk assessment assessor? Then you can start. So assessor must be a competent person as well as authorized person. He has sufficient knowledge, skills, experience. We discussed the competent person. Who is the competent person in the previous sections of the module. So here we briefly look again. So he has a good knowledge. He knows about all the activities, processes being conducted in the organization, and as well as all the equipments and the plants, machinery. He has a good knowledge. Also, he knows about the he has a good knowledge about all the circumstances and conditions that may lead to the hazardous situations, and he understands how to effectively stop or avoid such circumstances or conditions. Then he has good skill. He has all the skills and abilities to apply the knowledge whatever he has in an effective way. Then he has experience in the relevant field. He has seen all these things in the real world. Then he is authorized. He is nominated by the organizations. Obviously, then even only then his risk assessment will be valuable. And he has authority to. He is authorized by the organization to conduct the risk assessment, as well as authorized to implement any findings he will find in the risk assessment, or do any change or implement any change that is required. So such a person who is competent and authorized should be the assessor. Pre-risk assessment preparations, you can test your current understanding here. Stop the video, think of the answer. What do you think should be done before start of the risk assessment? So here we need to define scope and objectives, gather information, identify stakeholders and experts, develop a risk assessment plan, establish a risk assessment a team, schedule and coordinate with all the stakeholders. So how we define scope and objective? It should be first of all clear and precise. Scope is basically it describes what we are going to assess and what are our aims that we want to achieve. So they should be very clear and precise. So all the everyone who is involved in the risk assessment process clearly understand what we are going to do and what are our targets. Scope may include area, location, and departments we are going to cover, activities, processes, equipment, machinery that we will cover in the risk assessment, and materials or substances. Also, the people who are involved there in the activities or with the machineries or equipment, and what will be the roles of different people, participants of the risk assessment process. Then different types of documents that may be included in the scope, like policies, we will assess the policies, procedure, compliance, etc. Then objectives, there may be different objectives, like risk controlling the risk assessment should be maybe a simple objective. Then action plan, we want to develop some comprehensive strategies, risk mitigation strategies, or there is some legal requirement we need to meet. So that is why we are doing the risk assessment. Then maybe the business sustainability or HSE performance improvement. Maybe there are some incidents or clients requirement, or we want to improve our HSE performance. So objectives must be the clear and should be the smart one. So they are more beneficial. Then you need to identify the gather information at this stage that will be used in the later section or when you are executing the risk assessment. So types of information may be the past reports related to the incidents, accidents, or near misses. Then monitoring records about like inspections, audits, repair, and maintenance records of the equipment. Then your documents like may include policies, procedures, safety manuals, SOPs. Then consultation and feedback, the workers' feedback that you have gathered throughout the time. Then there can be the manufacturer's instructions like manuals related to the equipment or machinery, or material safety data sheets related to the chemicals or hazardous substances. Then industry standards, you can get the information from them. Then industry best practices, you can utilize the information from the industry best practices. Then research and development bodies like NIOSH that provide research and development regarding the health and safety. So these are the some sources where you can get the information that can help you during the risk assessment process. Then you need to identify the stakeholders that you may need to engage with regarding your risk assessment process. They may include employees, management, customers, clients, suppliers, or someone or representatives of the regulatory bodies. So once your scope and objectives are set, then you can define the whole plan of how you are going to implement the risk assessment. This may include scope and objectives, risk assessment methodologies, JSA, JHA, or HAZOP. Then risk criteria, how you are going to evaluate the risk, how you are going to evaluate the likelihood and consequences in form of low, medium, high, or you are going to represent them with numbers. Then evaluation of the risk in form of risk scoring, risk metrics, or something else. Then prioritization process, how you will prioritize them on the basis of likelihood, on the basis of consequences. Then what will be the tolerance level for your risk. Then you can you need to decide the timeline and milestone for your risk assessment. Then you have to establish the risk assessment team that can effectively conduct the risk assessment process. Then you have to identify the resources and the budget that you need for the risk assessment process. Then communication and reporting mechanism that will be utilized during the risk assessment process. Then you need to establish a risk assessment team that should be a competent and capable of conducting risk assessment effectively. The selection or composition of the team basically depends on different factors like scope and the objectives of the risk assessment. Then the categories of the risk involved during the risk assessment, like environmental hazards, health issues, chemical related hazards, and other safety. Or the legal requirements you are going to meet. Then the resources available. Obviously, the resources can be a big constraint for the level of the risk assessment you are going to conduct. Then obviously the methodologies you are going to adopt, like for the qualitative, maybe your normal team will be enough, or for the quantitative risk assessment, maybe you need someone who can know how to analyze the data. So maybe some data specialist. So this is how you establish the team, and different factors influence it. So for the consideration, it should be multidisciplinary. Roles and responsibilities should be clear, so everyone knows that what to do, what is expected from them, what is his role. And size of the and structure will depend obviously on the scope of the risk assessment, how many activities or the processes and equipments are involved, how many people are involved. Then the facilitator, the team lead, or who is chairing the team should be someone with good experience, good communication skills, and he has a good experience about the team management. Then potential members may include HSE specialist, occupational health specialist, a safety engineer, environmental specialist. and someone from the operations. Then there are additional members that may be required as per the requirements: regulatory compliance specialist, emergency response specialist, training and development specialist. Whatever team you develop, basically, so their objectives should be clear, so they understand what is expected from them and what they are going to achieve. And also the communication channel through which you are going to share the information or coordinate with each other should be effective one. And also provide adequate resources so risk assessment processes if conducted effectively. So once risk assessment plan is established and the team is established, so now it's time to schedule and coordinate the activities that you are going to perform during the risk assessment. They may include the inspections, employees interactions like interviews, surveys, etc. Methodologies, the methods or tools you are going to use like JSA has a. Then risk analysis evaluation methods, risk scoring method like metrics or number scoring. Then risk treatment planning, monitoring methods or the indicators you are going to set for the monitoring. Then documents reviews, which documents you are going to review like policies, procedures, risk registers, etc. Now let's look at the resources that we may need for the successful execution of the risk assessment process. Budget allocation, dedicated fund to meet different expenses, consultant fees if we hire or get the services from any consultant. Travel and training expenses may be there. Specialized equipment, some meters, sensor, testing devices, laptop. Communications, maybe we need email services, phone, video conference, things like that. Then maybe for the documentation, we need gadgets or software like Microsoft or Google Doc. Sources of information that can be helpful during the risk assessment. Internal resources, past reports related to injuries, accident, incidents, employee feedback, surveys, suggestions, etc. Then safety manuals, procedures, safety data sheets, old risk assessment, monitoring records, including inspections and audits, etc. Then maintenance record of the equipment or machinery. So these are some internal sources of information that we can utilize for the risk assessment. For the external, there are industry benchmarks and best practices, or the we can hire some expert related to the specific domain. Then industry associations or organizations, we can get information from them. Then there are regulatory bodies that we can get help from. There are research and development organizations or bodies like NIOSH, so we can consult them. There are international standards related to health and safety, we can consult them. So then there are online resources like OSHA website of the OSHA, we can go there and we can find some related helpful material. Similarly, NIOSH, Health and Safety Executive UK, so they all have the websites, so we can get the information from their websites. Next, generic risk assessment, pre-existing, pre-developed standardized risk assessment. Basically, those organizations which have multiple locations, but their processes and activities are standardized of the same type, and the equipments are similar. So we can develop a risk assessment which is applicable on all the locations, as the risk factor on all the locations are similar. So such a risk assessment is called generic risk assessment. Basically, hazards and risk factors will be very similar on all these locations. And these generic risk assessments are basically developed by the head offices and shared with all the locations. And then adaptability tailor, each location ensure it is appropriate for their place. So if there is any a new thing or any change required, so these risk assessments can be modified as per the requirement to adopt as per the needs of the location we are going to implement. Where we use these generic risk assessment, basically in the retail chains of the shopping malls or the fast food or hotel chains, franchises, as their processes, procedures, and the operations are standardized. They have similar type of layouts and the equipment, and their hazards risks are common across multiple locations. So in this generic risk assessment, basically we use a checklist, standard operating procedure, or pre-written risk assessment which are applicable at multiple locations. Then there is a dynamic risk assessment, which is basically the continual process of identifying potential hazards, risks, and then putting in the suitable control measures as the conditions change or circumstances change, and new hazards and risks are emerging all the time, and we have to address them and control them effectively. So these dynamic risk assessments, basically where the activities are more critical, like in constructions and oil and gas. So they are basically the continuous real-time process completed during the task, and continuous monitoring is going on as as the situations, conditions, or circumstances change. So any change happens there, then these risk assessments modify themselves, address new changes to ensure that our controls are effective. They basically vary or depend on the site-specific conditions. So in the dynamic risk assessment, continuous ongoing monitoring is essential to ensure that any new change or hazard or situation which is impactful can be addressed effectively. Dynamic risk assessments are used for high risk tasks or activities, especially the work environments which are very unpredictable or changing all the times, or the tasks or activities which may cause to the rise of multiple hazardous conditions of the serious level due to some circumstances or conditions, like a lifting activity. The weather or the work conditions are very unpredictable. You don't know when the wind speeds can change and can be dangerous. Then these dynamic risk assessment basically are the complement to generic risk assessment in a way that they are the continual process of monitoring to identify or look for any uncertainties or the situation that may be hazardous, and then immediately control them effectively. We covered all the topics. Let's conclude them. Who undertakes a risk assessment? A competent person with knowledge, skills, abilities, as well as the one who is nominated by the organization and is authorized to conduct the risk assessment. Pre-risk assessment preparations, we have to define scope and objective of the risk assessment. Then the relevant information required, we have to identify and gather. Then the stakeholders, we have to identify and then engage with them. And then risk assessment plan, we prepare. Then we schedule it and communicate. Then sources of information can be internal or external that we can use to make our risk assessment effective, like past reports within the organization, incidents, accidents, or near misses. From outside, we can use the regulatory bodies, guidelines, instructions, or standard related to health and safety, which are relevant to our risk assessment. Generic risk assessment, pre-developed risk assessment, usually developed by the head office and shared at multiple locations, where the processes or operations are standardized of the similar type, equipments are same, layouts are the same. Then the dynamic risk assessments are the risk assessment, which are the basically continual process of identifying hazards and then implementing suitable control measures where the conditions and the circumstances are changing all the time. So that was it for today. I hope this will be helpful for you. Thank you for watching and supporting me. So until next video, stay safe and healthy. Allah Hafiz.